CLion, a cross-platform IDE for C and C++. Download now.
My name is Sherry Sontag, and I am going to moderate and be part of this panel. Some time ago, my Callum and I really started having a discussion about some really amazing people at Bloomberg who overtly did not want to be managers. And we originally thought that that's what this was about. Well, as we started talking to others like us, and then to the people who manage us who are also on the stage, we realized it's much bigger than that. It's much more universal than that. Going off-road means finding projects and commitments and things that you're passionate about, and ending up with managers who are really good at giving you the freedom you need. And in my case, with the scaffolding that I need, because I am way ADHD. And you can do this like some of us do, where truly you take one small thing and it becomes something else altogether. Or you can do this in smaller ways. But what we've realized is the more you can break the mold, the more you can not worry about labels, the more you break it down to people and communication and partnership, the more this becomes not just about a place like Bloomberg where there's not a lot of hierarchy, but about all of us. And I should have realized this because my entire career has effectively been created on opportunities I was not particularly trained for or knew much about, but people leaning over and going, I think you'd be good at this. It's how I wrote a book about submarines and spies of all things. It's how I ended up at Bloomberg. And I have done best at Bloomberg under my current management, which includes Daniel Kiss, because he has figured out, when I introduced myself, I was already at 63 years old and now 64, able to say, I am really hard to manage, but I'm great if you partner with me. And after he finished being a little bit frightened, he, I think, discovered it was true. So I'm going to introduce you these guys here, and they're going to tell you pretty much why they're on this panel and what going off-road means to them. But really, we have just been speaking to like more than a dozen people about this over and over, and it gets bigger and bigger when people all start to relate. And we hope we inspire people to find their freedom in and understand that if they can boil it down to people and explain why they're passionate about something, we are all freer, even in a place that has ladders, to create careers that we love. So this is supposed to work, I think. Anyone? Okay, that's the ACCU slide. Okay, I am okay. Bloomberg's. Okay, so you've met me. CB, do you want to start since you're first on the picture
Okay.
after me?
I was expecting not to start because I'm kind of in the middle, but anyway. Hi, my name's CB. I joined Bloomberg in 2011, and I've worked across a number of teams in kind of like developer experience, and I'm now in a software infrastructure team under Marek. Before I joined Bloomberg, I kind of like worked in a number of different places. So I started in a internet startup, writing actual CGI programs in C++. And then I worked in business intelligence for a while. So I kind of had a 8-year career there before company I worked for was bought out by IBM. I've also worked in a very small software organization doing of just 10 employees, doing a lot of subcontracting work. So in SATCOM boxes for aircraft and train ticketing systems. So yeah, I've had a huge variety of different experience, but I've never been a manager or a team leader in any way. I've always been some form of individual contributor. Yeah, in my spare time, I'm also a challenge runner for Souls-like games. And because I've kind of, I've stopped sort of programming for fun in my spare time because I have so much of it in my job. Yeah.
And what makes CB feel like what makes CB somebody who has gone off road is she has, oh, good grief. She has always taken what was expected and gone beyond. She likes to take deep dives into things, and she repairs things that don't always aren't obviously broken, but she gets into the guts of things. And well, Merrick, why don't you go next? Just because you're the guy who lets her do it.
Yeah. So I'm Marek. I just celebrated 10 years with Bloomberg. I've been just in two teams. So I did some application development, but for last it's like 6 or 7, I am with like on a team with CB doing some developing some like software infrastructure, some like framework microservices, and yeah, that's it's amazing because like of the scale and everything. Before Bloomberg, I worked for a startup, some digital CCTV, and I spent some time in academia doing some formal verification, which nicely translates into the focus on the like the stability and like correctness that we have in this team. So yeah, and I'm trying to manage this team of 6 and do it, the best I can. I'm learning all the time, staying humble.
Well, what's kind of fun about Merrick is, unlike some other managers we spoke to, who had to really learn how to break free of expectations and rules to get the most out of some of their people. Sometimes when people left, Merrick started with CB and another fellow named Mike Thorpe on our team, who are both very brilliant and very independent. So Merrick had to learn that some other people actually like being managed. But you came from it backwards. Your first experience as a TL, right, was with super independent people working
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. So it was like easy and hard. So because my first two members were like very experienced people, very strong technically. So I knew from day one that technically we are not going to make any major problem. Like like we are fine. But it was like finding what is my contribution, how I can help these two individuals to do their best. And like later on, the team got kind of more like even out because we then had some like like junior hires. So there was kind of more like classical way of like supporting them. Yeah. So like the start it was interesting. It was a little bit stressful, but I think we survived.
Callum. Callum is in a team at Bloomberg that has to deal with the paying customer, the financial traders, basically. He's in derivatives. The deadlines there are not like an infrastructure where it's we'd really like to get it done. The deadlines there are contracted. He has found other ways of finding freedom. And we don't have his manager here today because he couldn't travel this week. But when we spoke to his manager, he's almost emotional about having learned how to let Colin breathe and also to let Colin bring that back to the rest of the team. Do you want to get a little bit more detailed about that and where you were from before?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Callum. So I've been at Bloomberg 6 years now, and yeah, I mean, for my current role, I do like to do things, move around, try different things, try different technologies, play about. I kind of sort of person who gets bored very easily in the same role doing the same thing. And particularly Python bindings at the moment has been my kind of go-to thing. And working with my manager, we were able to find a way to bring that and make it relevant to the day job, to make it relevant to what the customers need and what the project needs. And that kind of keeps me happy and keeps me engaged on a day-to-day basis and, adds value. I mean, going back to the start of my career, it's kind of, I started up in a small tech company just outside Cambridge, building robotics and sort of doing the engineering side of things. And that was a lot of fun and kind of cut my teeth there. But then I found that they were expecting me to do more and more people management, sort of team leading, project management, and less coding. At which point I kind of decided that that wasn't what I was interested in. So, I started contracting and contracted at sort of a wide variety of places, sort of engineering companies, tech companies, and slowly moved into finance. And yeah, over sort of a period of about 12 years, worked at a number of financial institutions. And it was very interesting, kind of both learning about myself, what do I actually enjoy, what do I want to do, what do I want my career to look like, and also seeing how different teams work. It was a lot of very good experience of working with different sorts of people, and without having to do any of that team leading management stuff, because largely contractors don't get given that sort of responsibility, which worked for me and worked for them. And then it got to the point where having a permanent job again had some benefits, and I found the position at Bloomberg. And yeah, it's kind of after a few years there, I started having conversations with my TL and manager about sort of how could I do some more stuff outside my day job, and how it went from there.
Well, one of the things I love about Callum's story is he is such a mentor on his team. And I think this is true of the people up here. We are not we're going to come in the middle of the night and we don't want context shifts. We are all natural teachers, but none of us are either by temperament or in my case, either by choice or in my case, temperament, able to do all the things you have to do to manage somebody else. And quite frankly, sometimes I can even manage myself. What I sort of need is someone to help me lay out, break big tasks into small pieces. So I don't think I'm still doing the same thing. So I could actually see progress. And God help him, Daniel took on that job. And I have never, I mean, he makes me better. And he seems to enjoy it. And that just shocks me. But Daniel Kiss, please tell us about yourself and what brings you to the panel.
Sure. So I joined Bloomberg straight out of uni. I went to uni in Nottingham, I guess not too far from here. And at some point, I started to realize that what I really enjoy is when I see immediate effect of what I'm doing. And that normally happens when I work with people. So I can see that, I help them teach something. I help them grow. I can see that, they got something that I managed to coach them about. So I started to go down on the path of people leadership. And this is the third team I'm leading at Bloomberg. So before joining this team, I applied for the position, and I was really insecure because I was supposed to lead people, a team of people who have 20 years more experience than I do. And then I didn't know how I feel about that. But then just very shortly after I joined the team, I realized that this is okay because we're all bringing something else to the table. It's all a different skill set. And exactly, yeah, working with Sherry and the other people on my team made me realize that together is really how we manage to create something really good. And as Sherry mentioned, I bring organization, and they bring all their talent and exceptional dedication to the work. So with that, we really managed to make it work. And I'm very happy about that.
So what I'd like to do is we are going to, oh, come on, if I can learn how to work a slide projector. We've started with who are we? And we're just going to go to making it work, what it takes. And then later we're going to go to the trade-offs. But right now, I mean, I could ask questions. I could have done this to the tape and we could have had an entire, thing on YouTube and it would have been fine. But I was really hoping that this was going to be more of an interaction with you guys because you're all in different kinds of situations. We've all been in different kinds of jobs. And maybe our experiences in learning how to do this dance and how to have this kind of partnership where both sides really feel inflated and productive can we can give you guys something, you can give us something. I can tell you that one of the things that has come up is how much these guys bring back to their team and how much they sit down and share what they're doing. And I was kind of shy about it for a long time because I kind of felt a little bratty. Oh yeah, I'm getting ready for another conference. And I realized the more I talk about it, the more I say what I'm doing, the more somebody gets to look up and say, how did you do that? I'd like to do that too. And by being shy, I'm actually stealing. If I'm going to ask them to pick up some of the heavy load, I need to be able to share the experience. So if they want to have some fun, they can too. So does anybody want to start with a question or about any of this, or I can just keep going? I could always talk. Yeah. Hi.
I have a quick question.
Well, Milo, why don't you
sorry.
introduce yourself? And
I'm Milo. I'm here with technically with my fiance. He was one of the keynote speakers. I have a quick question that you kind of draws back to what you said in the beginning of this talk was about making sure your employees stay fulfilled, I guess, in a sense, or making sure that your team stays fulfilled. I've worked in a company that I have constantly been trying to ask, give me something I can own, give me something I can chew on. I'm tired of just doing just kind of simple tasks in a sense. And it took so long that I eventually quit that job before they could give me something to work on. So I guess my question is, how would you recommend people who are in my situation, how would you go about talking to your managers and bringing that up the chain?
well, I think you start with your question really boils down to a classic newspaper problem. Start as journalists, guys. How do you find your idea? CB, you're good at that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Am I? I. um. So I think I think for me, um, Bloomberg is blessed with millions of lines of existing code and lots of obvious problems that don't have obvious owners. And it's really interesting in our organizations how many kind of individuals have good ideas um, that kind of cross traditional team boundaries. And we've also got lots of kind of like, or some internal structures which can which have really helped improve kind of like communication kind of like across the engineering organization. So there's almost no shortage of obvious problems, which is kind of really good. And then I think the key is just saying so bringing that so maybe this doesn't answer your question because like we have obvious things to chew on, and then it's just kind of like you can kind of bring stuff to your manager. Hey, we have this problem across the organization, and I think we're in a good place to try and address this. And I've been talking to this person in a sister team or even a faraway team, and this validates that this is a good problem to chew on, and I don't think anybody else is. What do you think? So that's
And there was a sort of a rule of three that came up with both you and Merrick, kind of. And it actually came up with another fellow, Cal, who found his first project off-road by literally trying to learn C++ by reading documentation, then trying to fix the documentation, then deciding there was a hole. What the idea of multiple ideas. Merrick, do you want to talk about that?
So like one thing I would like to add is that um, in our organization, it's fairly easy to change teams. So, and I realized on average, it means people are well aligned with the problems they like or they want to solve. So which means, like CB here next to me, she's into like these difficult problems that have this like scale and depth. And there are some other people who really want to be closer to the customer, having something like solving the problem for the customer quickly. So this is, I think, in the important part of the whole kind of the story and the discussion here. So what was the question?
Well, I think the question is, CB, you have shared that sometimes CB will come to you with several ideas, and it gives you a chance to choose.
So yeah, like somebody very clever described a job of team lead to mostly be aligning expectations, and I think there is a depth in it, and so like as a manager, a good strategy that I like is to relying on people's natural strengths. Like, but if somebody is really good in something, it works the best if they can really use the skill. And so then and I rely on like CB's expertise so that like if she sees some opportunities in the product that I may not like see, like, or my managers even don't see. And then there is it's not even like a negotiation, but it's a discussion about, like a little bit about like prioritization and like how to order things, like what is the value of it. But um, I really like somebody having an independent view, an independent stream of thinking about like the product, and then the team discussing, what's the best move given the resources, given like all the constraints that we have.
And the choices. And CB, I think you were saying that when you're working out what you want to present, sometimes you even start to ask yourself some fairly critical questions to zero in also, right?
Yeah, so I mean, like when it comes to like what's the next move? If I have something that I feel that we should do, I mean, kind of giving away my secrets a bit here, but like if you come to your TL and you say, I think we should do X, it's your TL's job to kind of like team leader job to like evaluate this. And if you say, I think we should do this thing, the counter position that you have to weigh against it is, well, maybe we shouldn't do this thing. It's like an immediate opposition. If you say we have this problem and we could do this thing, or we could do this other thing. You get to present the weights and the benefits in a way that the natural thing is for your immediate manager to choose the option that you want them to choose. But I mean, it's not really kind of about manipulation, but it also kind of like trains me to think in a way that a manager thinks, is like cost and benefits. Is there an easier way to do things? It's kind of like, here, this like half solution, it's a lot cheaper, but like I can see why that might be attractive. But yeah, let me present these two things and show how overwhelmingly doing it properly is, and then the choice is kind of obvious.
And sometimes things happen. So really, the simple answer to your question is we don't say, what can we do? Can you give me something? In fact, I once tried that in a newspaper, and they actually yelled at me for expecting them to hand me the idea. What we do instead is we poke around. CB and I started working on a process by which people use a important middleware code generator. And CB was like making it work better. And I was sort of talking to the people who were using all these different choices for it. And before we knew it, we had combined and we had made a big change. My boss, yes.
Yeah,
Daniel.
so exactly, just to add on to all of that, the key there is the question wasn't, hey, what can I do? The question was, I found this thing. How can I make it happen? So if all of my team come to me and ask the question, hey, what can I do? Even if I try my best, even if I really believe in them and I want to help them grow, I'm going to run out of ideas pretty quick. But if they come to me with the things they found that can be done, it's going to be much easier for me. Yeah, it makes sense. Go for it. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You want
Well, Callum wanted to follow up a little.
And
Yeah.
just on top of that, I was going to say it doesn't need to be an internal thing. So, maybe you've been to a conference and come back with some idea. I want to learn Rust. I want to learn X, Y. You can then go in and say, how can I make this relevant to what we do? Is there a place for trying this out? Is it okay if I spend some time looking at this technology and seeing how we can make it relevant? So, maybe you don't have this big chunk of work right in front of you or sort of within what you do, but if you find something you're actually interested in looking at, interested in investigating, then the question to your management becomes, how can you give me the time to look at this and how can we make it relevant to what we're doing in the job?
And
Yeah.
by the way, one more thing, and then you. The important thing is also they're not always going to be home runs. We have a friend back home who couldn't travel this week who said he throws about 3 or 5 things against the wall for every one that sticks. Okay, Milo, what your fault?
So a little bit of a fallout between what you said and also Callum said. To give a more clear example of something that I guess I can probably talk about it now. My last company, nobody on my team wanted to do third-party video cameras, and me being new and excited about work, I was like, put me on it. I will do it. I'm doing nothing else. Let me do the research. Let me do that. And it was back and forth between my managers and talking to them, and they kept saying, maybe. Well, we have these other people and stuff like that. But the people that they were mentioning were just, no, I do not want to touch that. I'm gonna pretend I'm working on something else, so I don't have to work on that. What would be your advice in that situation? Would it just be more persistence of just trying to just keep harassing the bosses and saying, I want to do this. I've been spending the time researching it and I want to be given a shot for that? Or what would you recommend?
Do you want to answer?
Sure. So it's a little bit of speculation at this point. I don't know exactly what was going on with your bosses, but like one thing you want to consider that sometimes the answer is going to be no for whatever reason. So I'm pretty sure CB also presented some ideas that, maybe just wasn't aligned with what's happening at that point. But if you bring 5 ideas and all 5 is no, then that's a problem. If you bring one and that one happens to be a no, that's okay. Just try something else. Now, in this case, it sounds like that they did want to do the project, just not with you. So that seems a bit strange. So I would probably just try and have an honest discussion about it, and also talk about how that makes you feel. Like why are we not? Sorry about that. Why as a company we're not focusing on this if we really think this is a priority, and look, I'm being available, and for whatever reason you're not allowing to work on this, that makes me feel not valued or not trusted, and then try and see where they're coming from, because I have a theory or a speculation that there's something else behind it, and then that way you can actually try and find out what that is, and it may be a legitimate business reason that just couldn't explain very well.
Was there any more opening to be just a tiny bit more subversive about it? Go to the people who are supposed to be doing it and ask them to show you, so the next time you have the conversation, you know just a little bit more. You've kind of done some of it.
Yeah. The other thing you can also try is it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So
And
you
he's
could,
saying that in front of me.
yeah. So exactly. So you could go and do it and present, hey, I've done this. Third-party cameras are working. What do you think? And then see what the reaction is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Would somebody else like to ask a question about making it work? Finding the right idea was a big part of this. Yeah. Hi. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Charles. I'm a long-time developer. I was coding in 1980. This seems to come down to sort of a rather enhanced leadership style. And one of the bugbears for me is working in publicly owned companies. Now, Bloomberg's privately owned, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a question here where when you're in a publicly owned company, you are much more strongly being driven by external shareholder financial imperatives. And so I'm wondering, I'd like to hear your thoughts about how you see your leadership styles here evolving in business and being able to work into a publicly owned company, because in a privately owned company, you do have more control over your own destiny. So I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Let's start with the TLs, the managers on the stage, but Callum, because you are in the area where there are customers paying good money for feature enhancements, and to make things work, I'll have him answer for his manager. But Marek, would you like to start?
Sure. I think on our level, I don't think there is much really different. Like, what is the ownership structure of the company, and like all the management I see, we really, we try to do the best for the users, for the customers. I believe that it's the same in publicly traded companies. So we are, if I can, like the catchphrase of some other companies, we are like customer obsessed. It's like we are serious about solving problems for our customers, and in our case, like regulation and make sure that um, you know, we use AI for the benefit of the customer, and and we are still reliable, and like the data are trusted. So it's the same focus, really. So yeah, I don't see. Yeah, I haven't. And as a disclaimer, I never worked for a big publicly publicly traded company. So yeah, but that's what I have.
Daniel?
Sure, yeah. So I don't really have the experience of working for a publicly owned company either. But one thing I want to point out is that even privately owned companies have many aspects of it that goes publicly. So we're being audited. Our customers are know what we work on, and I would like to think that unless we're talking about a company of size 5, there's always going to be a buffer of you as a company deciding on what you're focusing on and what you're actually working on, and that's really where all of this comes in. So I have my mandate from my managers and from my bosses as well that isn't going to include Sherry going to conferences or working on the internal guilds we have or things like that, right? So all of that is sort of within that buffer, within that allowance that I can give to my team in a way. So like if you're asking on the challenges of what happens if like everything is public, I don't know. I don't know how that would work in a way, but I would have no problem being very transparent with my managers about this. I can go back to my manager and say, yeah, Sherry is working on this, and this is why this is important. This is why it gives value to the company, and that's an important aspect anyhow. So just to make it clear, the idea isn't that you go and find something really shiny and then you just work on it just for the fun of it. No, the reason why you want to talk to your manager about it and be very transparent is to validate that yes, it gives value to the company. And an important part of that as well is that when someone comes to me and they present an idea, I don't overcommit. So I'm not going to say, okay, yeah, go for it, do it for a year, and then see what happens. Because then maybe within that year, after that year, we're just going to throw all of that out, and then that's a lot of wasted effort. But I do like regular check-ins. I like to check in, let's say, once a month, because at that point, you worked on something for a month, and then we throw it out. That's okay. And then the value you got is some learning experience. You grow from it. Next time you'll know better. That's fine. If you do the same thing for a year, I would be more upset, right? So, but if you check in on a monthly basis and we can see, yes, it still adds value to the company, it still aligns with our priorities, I would have no problem. And I would imagine if it's a publicly facing company, you can, again, present a case, a good business justification. I would hope, but again, have no experience, that would be okay.
Describe your team a little bit. And why, in your case, it is very, very visible. We're in infrastructure. We're kind of a layer back. We have to make sure everything works. But you are like there are signed contracts with your customers, and they're paying a ton of money to have the service.
Yeah. So yeah, we provide sort of some of the pricing products directly to the customers. So we've got deadlines to meet for enhancements that we've committed to customers and so on. So there is definitely that aspect that we do have to deliver. So anything else we take on does have to be managed in line with those timelines and so on. So yeah, I mean, as Daniel's saying, it's all about sort of working out. Or you take on an idea but keep track of it. You don't overcommit. You make sure that it is adding value, that you are trying to get that feedback that coming back from it. One thing I would say is sort of having worked in a number of banks, what the biggest difference between working somewhere like Bloomberg and working in sort of a bank where you've got shareholders and so on, and some of the other companies, is Bloomberg has the luxury of profitability, that does give you some headroom and some management some headroom. Whereas, I've worked in a number of banks and obviously they are profitable, they're still around, but the shareholders are asking for more and more. And so every manager from the top down is asked where they can cut some money, where they can squeeze that extra 5%, that 1% out so that you can get that extra margin back to the shareholders. And what I've seen work there is people take the first step by themselves, the ask for forgiveness rather than permission bit. And once you say, this particularly one role I had, we had a dreadful build system. Pretty much people were building stuff on their desktop and putting it into production from their desktop. And someone, and this wasn't even that long ago. And so someone came in and new joiner, great guy, sort of, we were really busy on our project, really snowed. And so we hadn't got him up to speed with everything. And he had a bit of time to actually go and look at this and say, hold on, well, let's centralize this. I can improve all these scripts. I'm going to rewrite it in Python for you. And, we had something of an automated build system by the end of it. And he had the time there to sort of spend a couple of weeks looking at it, go back to the manager and say, look, we really need to sort this out. I've started doing it here. This is the benefit we'll get. And then he got the time and space to be able to do that and deliver it. So yeah, in those sorts of scenarios, you kind of need to go to your manager with, this is what we can do. Look how much I've done in 2 weeks just off my own bat. Please give me a couple more weeks or a couple more months to go and do it properly, and I can save you this much developer time. So I'd say that's kind of how it fits into those sort of tighter organizations.
And CB,
Can I just have a quick recap of that question so that I'm
Yeah, sure. It's a case of pretty much as Callum, as you answered, there's a slightly different way of managing leadership style, I think, in a publicly owned company as opposed to a privately owned company.
but I believe that the discussion evolved into showing value. And I was going to say, you fell into a project that showed enormous value, this shrinking of our.
I think I want to answer the question more directly.
Sure, sure.
So I've worked in so my first job was in an internet agency, which I would class as a small privately owned company. I then worked in a business intelligence company that was I think it was NASDAQ traded and was big, but publicly owned. I've worked in a very small privately owned software company and now at Bloomberg, which is privately owned. I think size has a much more direct bearing on structure, freedom, innovation than the ownership structure. So in particularly the two smaller privately owned stuff, while nominally that you've, in both of them, I walk past the owners, not the manager, not the CEO, the owner of the company's office, to my desk. And in both places, I had the freedom to go in and say, hey, we're doing this wrong. And they were friendly and in one case even listened to me. The constraints of being small was such that even if I had a great idea, it's kind of like, yeah, but this contract, it closes now and we've got to start something new. We're going to have to, we can't. We just can't afford to. And I think size is a much bigger influence.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because I'll talk about something near and dear to some people's hearts here. My manager, who's since gone off to get a doctorate in childhood counseling, called me in after I'd been to a number of conferences and gotten very involved, and said, "Well, I can't point to anyone that we've hired. So what's the value?" And I said, "Well, I've been talking to the CTO's office, and they've been saying that this is core mission, that we're not just technology leaders, we're community leaders, and they want me there." And he said, "Are you sure?" So I called up the woman I work with as our contact at the CTO and said, "Am I a nice to have, or am I core mission?" And she spent a half an hour saying how our work coming here and talking to all of you is core mission, that they want to know just not what Bloomberg stands for technologically, but also for community. And I was able to go back to Andrew, who then shared it with his management, saying, "Yep, there's a value here." So a lot of it really does go to, you're right, size is a big deal because you have the luxury of showing value in different ways, but a lot of it is being able to absolutely show value. And as Daniel said, not just going after a passion project.
Thank you.
Would somebody else like to ask us a question? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Fatima. I'm an engineer with Bloomberg. I've been there for almost 2 years now. So a question I had was that as a junior developer, as somebody who's recently like starting out, uh, it seems like people have some opinions on their career in general. Like, oh, this is something I enjoy, this is something else. But when you start out, you don't really know what you want, or it's kind of difficult to understand that is it necessary to form an opinion right out of the like right in the beginning, or you can take your time to dip your feet in a couple of things and then figure out what you like, or what was the process for you guys to understand, oh, this is something I do enjoy, or this is something I don't enjoy.
You want it?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I would say definitely take your time. There's no rush. And you see people who change careers 20 years down the line. So it's never too late. And I would recommend that it's actually better that you actually try out a few different things. So before I became a TL, I actually went down a slightly different path of like we have this internal program in Bloomberg where you can be a technical representative, and that's less about people management and more about just like the technical aspect of this. And I tried that as well, but it didn't feel as fulfilling to me. So yeah, if you can try, go for it. And the fact that you don't know it right now, that's okay, right? That just means you're still exploring, you're still learning, and don't be discouraged. And then all those people who you're in a way you're comparing yourself to, which I would advise against just in general, who seem like, oh, they got it all figured out, they know what they want. 5 years from now, they might have changed twice already. So not everything is exactly as it seems. So don't be discouraged. I think you're doing just fine. And the fact that you asked the question means you have the right mindset and you have the right idea of, okay, I'm curious. I want to figure out what really is my passion, and do continue with that curiosity, tap into that until you find what that is. And then once you do, you're gonna know. You're gonna feel like, oh yeah, this is good.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, at 2 years in, I didn't know what I wanted to do either. So and I do remember that point in time, I had a conversation, sort of the equivalent of annual review, with my manager at the time. And he was kind of, yes, that's fine, you don't know what you do, but start to think about what you might want to try next. And it really is a what you might want to try next kind of thing. Where do you want to be in a year's time? And that doesn't mean that's where you are in 5-10 years. That's where you want to kind of be in a year's time. And just try things. I mean, as I say, I tried doing project management, I tried doing team leader, those sorts of roles. And it's only through actually trying them and doing it for a couple of projects that you realize, actually, that's not as fulfilling. I really want to be writing the code, not being responsible for the people who write the code kind of thing. But that's me, and yeah. And you only find that out by sort of trying different roles.
you mentioned that you've had some young just out of school engineers.
But I really want to share like my own experience. Like
Okay, cool.
be like sponge, like absorb all the things that you see around, try different things, and like it will become obvious only in the hindsight. I never wanted to be a TL, team lead. I thought that my team lead, that it's like too overwhelming. His calendar was like scary, but then I saw this opening for the position I am now having. I thought, yeah, I want to do this, and I love it. So there is like some randomness and luck and everything. So embrace it, and you will see.
CB,
I have to lead into that, don't I? Yeah.
yeah,
No,
you saw you've seen the same opening.
yeah. So I mean,
Opening.
I'm going to say like oh, I want to say about 5 things. So this may be the last time I'm allowed to speak, so I'm just going to go with it. So like I joined Bloomberg like about 3 or 4 years after my first ACCU conference, where I saw some ex-Bloomberg employees talking with John Lakos animatedly about the great things at C++ and different opinions on how they should be done. And I thought, these people really know their stuff. Maybe, but I didn't quite like my current job. And 3 years later, probably beyond anybody's metric of whether we should go to conferences to recruit people, some massive gap after that, I joined Bloomberg. And the first team I was in, I was not particularly successful. It sounded really interesting. The people were great, but the work I was doing, it didn't kind of quite mesh with my skills. And there's no kind of obvious reason why that shouldn't be. It was like C++. C++ was my language. It was a kind of a big framework. But in the end, it's kind of like I have a maths degree, and it was to do with like pricing stuff, and so there was lots of heavy maths there. But in the end, we were kind of more on the framework and wrangling of data, and we were using a pricing library, so I didn't really even get to use that. And I talked to my sort of team leaders and managers, and they were aware that I wasn't doing kind of as well as probably I should be, given my background. And then there was an opportunity for me to get seconded to before we had an official developer experience department, to developer experience. And I started a project where we produced a variant of lots of low-level tools that we packaged up in our own area to make all of our different platforms kind of behave the same, with a view to kind of overhauling our build infrastructure. And that's the foundation of some stuff that we still do today. And that was really great, and it kind of worked really well. But that was something like where I was not being successful, and then we found somewhere else. And after I got seconded in a whole lot of work, I kind of got transferred, and I kind of enjoyed that for a long time. But I was doing less C++. There was lots of kind of glue, kind of scripting stuff, some exploring new technologies. But I kind of really yearned to do kind of big core stuff. So in about 2018, the team that I'm now in, who at the time were entirely New York based, they just put out an internal job posting for a team leader in London. And I thought, hey, that's really exciting, because I don't want to be a team leader at all. But this means that they're going to have a team in London. So I'm going to watch that, and I'm going to see who takes that team leadership role. And as soon as, and like, you don't have a team leader without a team, right? So when they open up their team, I'm gonna see who it is, and I'm gonna, I'm not definitely going to apply, but if it looks good, I'm going to go for it. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. So yeah, and I still don't want to be a team leader, and I open up my team leader's calendar to have a look at it, and that's not me.
Then there's all the stuff that's not intentional. Mike Bloomberg was talking to a bunch of 13-year-olds, and he said, nobody does anything alone. Almost everything good that happens to you will happen because somebody said something nice about you, and you may never even know about it. My most important jobs have come because suddenly I was offered something out of the blue. And I have trained myself to know that the first 2 weeks, I mean, I am ADHD enough to not like change. The first 2 weeks, I'm going to be utterly overwhelmed. But if I like it after that, it's worth staying. I thought I was coming to Bloomberg for a few months to maybe help write a little doc, and my colleagues started pulling out books on linkers and loaders and large-scale architecture, and that was 19 years ago. So you just be open. If you are honest about what you can do, it's okay to be offered something that you can't do yet, right? Somebody thought it was possible. They probably are smart, and give it a shot. Things happen when you're not even expecting them, and life happens when you show up. Would somebody else like to ask us a question? I would love to bring up, I have known people who, even at our company, who are it's less independent than selfish. They are very determined to draw outside of the lines. Now, I think we draw outside of the lines, CB, Callum and I, and some of the others who have been part of this panel at different times. But I think we do it with a real sense of community, with a real sense that we have a responsibility to give it back, to work with the people on our team, to work with our managers to make life better for other people too. And I think that kind of com- community, that kind of team play, being a team player is important. Would either of you, would you guys want to, any of you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, sort of involving the rest of the team, bringing the rest of the team along with you, is part of the reason I kind of get to do this fun stuff that or the side role that I get to do in my job, because a lot of this technologies, a lot of the ideas, when I bring it back to the team, it's not necessarily that other people on the team are suddenly really interested in Python bindings, interop between C++ and Python, but it gives them the idea that there is the space to go and do what they're interested in. So if they're really interested in Rust, or they're really interested in multi-threading and looking at new multi-threading libraries, coroutines, or whatever they decide, they suddenly have the permission to say, okay, well, if Callum's doing this for, day a week, day a month, whatever, then they also have permission to go and do the bits that they're interested in and work out where they can bring that value back into the team. Now, obviously, that all has to be done along with the management, with manager and stuff, and it's a communication thing. But yes, the more you talk about what you're doing in these roles, the more it gives other people permission to think about where they can do something similar. And like Sherry mentioned with conferences, as she gets involved with conferences and what she likes to do, the rest of her team suddenly become aware that that's an option for them as well.
Yeah, I think transparency in general is very, very important. Like, if you can bring value into the team, fantastic. But even if you're just giving value to the company in general, you want to be very transparent about it. You don't want to do it on the side. You don't want to do it like sort of in the corner of like, oh, no one knows in the team what you're doing Friday afternoons, because then everyone's going to question like, what's going on? Why is Sherry not doing her core duties? Well, it's because she's doing something else that's also very important, and your whole team needs to be a part of that. So they need to understand what's going on, because sometimes they need to pick up that extra work that's happening, and they need to understand why. And at the same time, that way they can also say, oh, okay, now that you're not working on a conference, let's say, Sherry, and then you can help the team cover for the period when you were away, and then it sort of makes it an equal balance at that point. So you don't want to create friction in the team just by you working on something that's not directly tied to the team. You want to be very open and transparent about it and open up for discussion as well, and that way you can avoid the friction.
But it kind of goes one step further too. I'll look up when I'm on a call, which means we all take turns doing some of the very basic stuff that has to be done on our team. And you get a week for that. And I'll look up and there'll be nothing there because like Dee will go, well, I grabbed that for you, Sherry. I saw you were busy. And I'm starting to say things like, oh, Jackie, get your passport up to date because you can do this too. Or Dee, if you want to talk in a conference, I can help you come up with ideas. I want more than to be transparent and for them to know what they're working for. I want them to know that I want to support them too.
Hmm.
And I think that helps. I think that's why I've been met with such an open heart about it. And I want to do that more. Like I said, I've been shy sometimes when something takes longer than I expected or about saying everything I'm doing. And I realize that is part of it. It's not sharing just the offer of help, but the actual sense of possibility. TB, Merrick,
There's
you
a
know? Oh, we have a question? No, Brett, go for it.
Hi, I'm Brett. I'm an engineer, so I'm going to ask an engineer question. Are there technological principles or technologies that make it easier to either become or function as an off-road engineer, I guess is what we're talking about, right? So does anyone have any thoughts around that? Like, because that's something we might, as engineers, have more influence over than, say, organizational culture or even how our boss feels about specific things, right?
CB started that, right?
Did I?
You did when you said the existence of a code base that has grown and needs to grow and needs to fill in you know.
Right, yeah. So I think you can't underestimate the value of informed experience, I guess. Um, I gosh, I don't have kind of like revelations while sitting mid panel, but yeah, I have. Without kind of giving away my age, I have kind of like coded in many different environments. I have a lot of opinions about things, and I think if you're going to kind of like drive off road, um, knowing how to survive off road and when to turn back and when to take a break is probably very very appropriate and useful. I think I have an issue with like I think it's always good to defer having like an opinion on something until the late moment, not maybe not the latest possible moment, but it's good to constantly kind of see what other people are doing, absorb that experience. But a lot of the time, like I have strong opinions about stuff, and it's backed up by experience, my own experience, what I've seen other people experience, what I've kind of read people write articles about their experience in different organizations. So I have opinions about how my particular team have organized our source code, and I can see the advantages about the way that we've gone. I also think we could try another way. It's also not the appropriate time to kind of totally change this, because there's like all sorts of other stuff that I have opinion on, which I think is more reasonable to kind of change now.
So I'm hearing you saying there may be, I don't know if this is what you mean to say, but it sounds like part of what you're valuing is like transparency in the engineering process helps a little bit.
Yes,
True?
yep.
Merrick was telling me a story that is appropriate for this.
So it's as I mentioned, it's like somebody having an independent like opinion and like being original thinker. And so it's always a question like who should go to what meetings where things are planned and so on. But like for example, CV showed interest to go to a meeting with my manager where we basically consider whatever like enhancement suggestions from our users. And it's great to have somebody there with with informed opinion, with like uh, based on some experience. So like she's contributing a lot onto this meeting. So the you know uh, it's great that if the levels of management are definitely not isolated from each other, and it's not like it shouldn't be like army. Should be there needs to the communication needs to flow both ways. And yeah, that's what I have.
And Callum, when we were talking to Piotr, who Callum works with and for, he was telling me that not only have you been able to go off and work on Python boundings, but your team does testing differently because of it. You want to just
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways, sort of, me going off and exploring these possibilities. I've been able to bring it back into the team, add value. We've had an intern come and look at this stuff, and so we've had basically a whole intern project around it. We do our testing differently for some of our C++ code because of it. So there's been definite value. Now, when I first set off down this road and saying I want to go and have a look at this, there wasn't a clear benefit for the team, and it did take sort of 6, 9 months or so before there was a benefit. There was clearly benefit for me. I was enjoying it, and Piotr was kind of satisfied at that point that it was adding benefit to me. But as a team level, he was thinking, if it finished now, then while it was a good experience, it might be considered a failure in some respects. But once we managed to find a way to make it applicable to the team and improve our testing frameworks and bring interns in and so on, then it became seen as a lot more successful. Definitely. And yeah, that there was a sort of lot of communication there between me and my manager about how we could do that and sort of how to manage all of that. I think the original question was, are there any technologies and stuff that it's easier to do this with? Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I'm
I'm getting a nuggets in there. So you're saying you worked on some projects, you that didn't disrupt existing systems, that could later be folded into the existing systems? Like you
Yeah.
mentioned the phrase, or maybe Daniel did, forgiveness over permission. Maybe it played a role in that. I don't know, maybe that's helping you connect some of the dots. But I hear some of what I'm
Yeah.
asking for in your answer, if that makes sense.
I think, yes, it's kind of, so there's no particular technologies, but it's find something that might be relevant to your team, play about with it, and see how you can join the dots, I think. And yeah,
To try and summarize a lot of this just in a single word, which doesn't really answer your question, but I think is a key to all of this, is curiosity.
That is a lot of it. And by the way, Piotr, when told me that when Callum came in with his interest in Python bindings, he immediately started thinking, how can we use this? How can this fit? Not beyond just encouraging him to explore. What can this do for my team? Piotr loves OCaml, and he found out that some of his team members wanted to learn it too, and now they've got services in OCaml. So it's kind of people saying what tech is there and how could we use it. Daisy had been talking to me about AI, and right before this meeting, I had to fill out a very embarrassing questionnaire that said, yes, I haven't used it. And I really am, now that I'm filling out this questionnaire, I realize I need to turn it on. I need to use it. I need to get my feet wet because they kind of lost me at ChatGPT as a writer. My response to ChatGPT, anything it writes is, oh God, thank God this is here because I know what I'm not going to do. But Daisy was pointing out, and I came straight to Daniel with it, that I've been effectively, as the non-coder in an engineering shop, vibe coding, saying, well, I need something that does this and touches that and does accomplishes these things. And then inevitably I'm surrounded by engineers who can engineer it for me. And so we're now thinking about, well, maybe that could be useful. Maybe, Daisy exploring what I can do that way can let me bring that back to the team. And we're already it's an idea. It may or may not stick to the wall, but it is what is out there that we're curious about, and can we make it work is really the question. And then you want somebody, Milo, who doesn't say no. And sometimes the only thing you can do is change teams or jobs. If you're really with somebody who has not learned the art of letting go a little bit, and to let you do that. But that does bring us, I don't know what time it is, but it does bring us to maybe starting to shift a little bit to, come on, the trade-offs. And one of those trade-offs becomes learning to live with ambiguity. We are effectively saying we are jazzed by finding parts of the world that we could explore, that we could also make valuable. But we're doing it without titles. At Bloomberg, we do it without levels. We have to learn live with ambiguity. Daniel, do you want to start that one?
Sure, yeah. So if you go into people management, there is this appeal that, oh, I know exactly what my path is. I'm going to become a team leader, then a junior manager, middle manager, and then I go into senior management. It's all laid out. It's fantastic. And if you're not doing that, suddenly you're ended up with this open field. It can be scary because it's not laid out. So what can you do? So what I want to advise there is, don't be discouraged by that. Don't fall into the, oh, I have a clear path in people management, so maybe that's what I should pursue. Because if that's not what you're really into, you're going to regret it. So if really the only thing you're looking for is a clear path, sit down with your manager and define what that is. And then really what you're getting is this freedom. Freedom to define your own path. Freedom to figure out what really is your road, your off-road in a way to follow. And I think that's a very nice trade-off at that point. You're giving up the certainty for freedom, and then you can actually figure out what works for you. Anything to add?
CV?
Um, Yeah, so I think, yeah, I have mixed feelings about job titles. I think you do see people saying, "Oh, I don't need a job title," and I think that's definitely a position of privilege. I think, especially kind of like people early in their careers and from underrepresented groups, a job title can people unfortunately do kind of like measure you against it, and you know an appropriate representative job title can help you get the ear of people you kind of need to. That said, yeah, o- off road kind of like chasing the job title and chasing the grade and things. A lot of the times it's a proxy for money in many organizations. Um, yeah, I think if you're going off road, you need to think differently. You need to choose. Uh, you need to kind of like work out what you want, what you would consider like a successful move or a successful role, and kind of build from there. I kind of I was kind of interested in our talk before. It's kind of like, you know, how do you work on what you want to work on, or you know, how long does your manager give you going off in this direction before they go, is this valuable for anybody? And I'm always thinking, is like, well, um, what is the goal of all this? Do I want to be a satisfied human? So what I do is I find a role in an organization which is at least sufficiently aligned that you know we both get benefit from that, or maybe, yeah, maybe that is it. And maybe, you know, maybe we're trying to off road, what we're trying to do is actually just kind of like rotate the organization until you find an alignment that lets you go in a path that you find fulfilling, rather than to change your direction into a path that the organization finds fulfilling. I don't know. Things to think about, I guess. I've gone off on a tangent, so that's great. I'm off road completely now. I've turned around. I can't see civilization or humanity, so I have to get somebody to rescue me.
So to add on
I-
to, I don't just one second. Yeah, to add on to what CB was saying as well, like with the titles, it can be a really interesting double-edged sword, because you go into a meeting and you have this title, then maybe it gives you this sort of power that now people look up to you, like, oh, maybe you have more influence as such. But it can also work the other way around, because people have certain expectations of certain titles, and maybe you're not meeting just like one tiny little bit of that, you can lose credibility really, really fast. And then people are like not gonna believe you or not gonna trust you at that point. As opposed to you go in without a title, people don't have that expectation, and suddenly you can bring to the table exactly what you can offer, and then people can take that at that face value at that point. Sorry, you wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's very valid. I was going to pick up on another point CB made, which is part of what you're doing when you go off road is coming up with your own definition of what success is to you. And yes, maybe job title is success, and for some people it has been. I've worked with people who have worked sort of for maybe 2 or 3 years to get that next step up, get the next promotion, get into the next pay band and things like that. But sometimes it becomes a distraction. So, you know, when you've got 3 people on the team competing for one promotion that goes out each year, it can be very, very divisive and can get toxic within a team as to why did they get promotion, not me? Why have they got the big pay rise, not me? Kind of thing. So, but you know, part of being off road is working out what success means for you, and you may not have an answer for that to start with. It may sort of take some time, take some experience, and trying different things to work out what does success mean for you. And you can't have everything. You know, if money is your motivation for success, then sort of maybe being sort of going off road isn't going to be the most productive way. But if you know, working in a particular technology, trying to investigate things, you know, you want to work on coding, then maybe you can find some definition of success that works for you and keeps you happy and motivated. Because you know, you want to enjoy getting up in the morning. You know, we're software developers because we enjoy working with software. So, you know, you hope to find some way of making that enjoyable.
Mary?
it's this magic of we don't have titles, but then there are some people who are like so well known across the company, and what's the secret sauce in it? Like some of them are managers actually, some of them are not. And I realized that we actually, we don't have titles, but we have this. There is a, not so off-road path like this. Like we have this career toolkit, right? Like, and it's basically, um, if somebody is universally known in the company and they are being a manager, it means that they have influence across, like, like beyond the boundaries of the team or like your small organization. They do something that's like somehow visible to like a number of people, which by definition or should be that not just visible, but it should be something useful. It means they produce value. So it's the, I think, the art of steering your own career to think what's your strength and how you can produce value so that it's like so visible. And then like somebody mentioned, like titles being proxy to money, then like in the end we are paid. So this also translates into some internal ways of how we like evaluate people, and then like it gives you
Money catches up.
that as
Yeah.
well. So it's
Yeah, we need a mic.
Hi, I'm Peter. So my question was, we were talking about like titles are proxy for money, but now I hear like visibility is now the new thing. So, and this is also what I experience in my company. So they say, okay, if you want to get ahead, so you need more visibility. But is this really the real, or is that also the only thing that we should look at? Because I think there are people that really have great value that are not visible. So it's people doing the obscure things that keep the company running, but that are not known maybe outside of the team. So how would you deal with those people, and how can you keep them motivated?
So if it really adds that much value, I would question why is it not more visible? And maybe some of that is not on the individual, but on their team lead or the manager to advocate for them as well, which is very important. So which is, again, I bring back to transparency. Talk about what you're doing. Talk to your manager. Talk to your TL, because at that point they can help you get that visibility. And then the other aspect of it as well is that, yeah, really when it comes to like compensation, one thing that is important to understand that usually that's going to have some sort of correlation of how wide your impact is, right? Because if you're only doing a single person's job, and even if you do it extremely well, it's only going to be a single person's job. But if now you expand your impact and actually you're impacting 5 other people, or 10 other people, or 50 other people, that's when you can have, a more of an exponential effect of what value you give to the company. And at that point, that can be compensated appropriately as well. So yeah, my advice would be is you're working on something that's so critical, talk about it. Talk to your manager. Even if you can't, even if you're maybe not extroverted and you don't like talking about to everyone, talk to your TL and make sure that they understand. And then because they are in people management, they should be more extroverted. They should be doing the advocacy for you. And at that point, hopefully can create that visibility. And it's going to be good for them as well. Any good visibility within my team is good visibility for me as well. So even if for no other reason, for selfish reasons, they should do it.
I was going to say on that, you also need to be aware of the difference between, say, criticality and influence. So there was a brilliant slide on talk yesterday from Gail's talk, where you've got this huge architecture all being pinned up by one key brick at the bottom. If you happen to be working on that brick, yes, it's critical. And obviously, that should the company should be aware of that. But that's not the same as saying someone who is who's worked on a piece of software that's then influenced and made 10 other developers' jobs much easier, that's had a wider impact outside their team. So you've got to balance that level of sort of criticality and underpinning company against kind of someone who's having a bit wider impact, I think. That's not to say that the person who's working on critical software shouldn't sort of be adequately recognized and compensated, I guess. But, you know, then you've got to look at why is that piece so critical? Can you shore it up? Can we do some work to kind of not so much remove that, but sort of stabilize it possibly a little bit and then bring that to have a wider influence. But yes, you need to make that visible, but it's not the same as having influence.
Well, I would also say that if it is that critical and you're the guy doing it, there's a concept that Andrew used to like to quote, which is learn one, do one, teach one. You don't want to be the only person who can do that. You do want to make sure and make a point of making sure that that knowledge is shared. So if you're not available one day, then, you know, and you let your, you know, that you have now been responsible for making sure that people understand that piece of cardboard holding everything up, that you can do that. CB, what about you?
Yeah, so I'd say that I just can kind of like build on that. I mean, that classic diagram where there's a tiny thin piece holding it up. It's kind of like just because you're working on that doesn't necessarily mean that you should have more recognition or that you've done a better job. But you think about that diagram, it wouldn't look so silly, scary if that brick was just wide and took up all of the space there. It would just look like a solid, stable component that people work on. And so, like, the metaphor is kind of like stretchable, I guess. But certainly, if your role was to work on that little piece of infrastructure in your organization, and your output over the year was, you know, it broke 12 times and we fixed it each time very quickly, and so we've got the bugs out. People go, oh yeah, that's great, you've kept that going. It's pity it breaks so often, huh? If your thing was like, we looked at the architecture and we saw why it was broken, we restructured it or we replaced it with this component, and, you know, after 3 months we had 0 bugs and nobody had to do anything for 9 months. Now that is worthy of recognition and that's worthy of talking about. And that's kind of like, sure, you're working on something critical, but now you've made it robust, and that is kind of worth speaking about. Now, something that's like has no bugs reported against it for like an entire year, it's very easy to overlook. That is absolutely true. And I, believe it or not, I'm not particularly comfortable kind of like showing off stuff that I've done that's in that sort of arena, but I force myself to at least say, at least tell my manager and some of the people I directly work in. And then sometimes people kind of like say, hey, you should talk about this on this internal thing. Or maybe, like a few years ago, I actually kind of wrote a blog post about something that I'd done, which was kind of outside of my comfort zone. And I you know, called in some favors with people who I knew were better at writing and say, hey, I'm writing this thing, can you proofread it? And now that is something I'm kind of like proud of, and, you know, made me a bit more visible and got a bit of recognition. So yeah, criticality is not the same as kind of impact and influence. But if you are doing something impact, and if you and measure as well, that's another crucial thing. If you can measure it. So I made a change to our code generator that I've done several changes. One of them reduced the size of the generated code. We measured that impact, and so we could kind of point to it and say, look, this is the size of difference that we made. I made another one which I failed to measure quite as well, which kind of reduces the lookup time in the C++ compile step for every single library that like touches us, which is hundreds. Huge influence. You know, step back, recognize when you've done something, and make sure at least the people around you kind of know about it, and see if there's a forum to kind of share this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I like the measurement aspect.
Yeah.
The metrics, someone brings me metrics, I'm going to love it. Because then I can very easily advocate for them. I can then bring that to my manager and say, look, this is what this person did.
Yeah, and especially the metrics about, you know, things that haven't broken, I find them really compelling. So I mean, I don't know if you remember there was a change to one of our things that was it was a performance issue we had for ages, and like every few weeks we get this ticket and it would say timed out trying to do this thing. I did some deep dive C++, totally changed a whole lot of stuff, and about like half a year later, I came back to Marek and said, "Hey, we used to get those kind of like weekly tickets, and sometimes we get dozens of them over the weekend. You realize we haven't had a single one over the past 6 months? Isn't that good?"
This lands on something that I think jives a lot with not having titles and everything else. These guys have all been so much more secure about it than I was. Up until a very short time ago, I would go to people I worked for and with and go, okay, I know I'm senior, but how does anybody else know it? And sometimes they just look at me and go, Sherry, does anybody not know you? But but Daniel and Andrew and others started saying, well, would you like to do? Brett was the first one who looked at me and said, you should really offer that to a conference when I was talking internally. And I have been kind of on the circuit ever since he said that. I've gotten to be part of our internal C++ Guild's conference committee, which means I'm working with CTO. I've got to coach a writing series in our team of 6 where we call it show and tell. And once a month, somebody gets to give a talk. Brett, you're on for like April, by the way, next week, gets to give a talk. And when they'll let me, I'll coach them through it. And really, it's in my case, it wasn't making me more visible. It was giving me the confidence to understand what was true. But it's sometimes knowing who you are, and sometimes asking others to help you know who you are. And again, it goes back to the trade-off for me, which is the ambiguity. I some people don't. Some people are just confident enough to know. I kind of wasn't, but I got help. We have about 5 minutes. Is there anything that you'd like to ask or anything you guys would really like to say? Yeah.
I'm David. I was just wondering, this character of like an individual contributor seems to be about independence, seems to be important, and delivering value. I was wondering, to what extent would you say it's related to the phrase of earning your keep?
Being useful helps. Being useful really helps. It if people see what you're doing, if people appreciate what you're doing, yeah, you earn your keep. I'm 64 years old, and it so happens that John's boss at the time was responsible for giving me my permanent desk from the contractorship about 19 years ago. And I said to him recently that I'd really like to stay around another 10 years. And he looked at me and said, well, you're doing a good job and you're still having fun. Being useful helps. Guys, do you want to?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So if in a way you are giving value, you can show that you're giving value and people recognize it, why wouldn't they like you? Right? At that point, it's just very human nature that, oh, there's someone who's giving value, helping me, helping the company. Okay, maybe they're not doing what I'm doing, maybe they're not doing what I would do, but that seems okay. And then I'm gonna like that. So yeah, I think it's having the value and also showing it to other people that's really what you're doing.
No.
I think part of that is sort of in your day job. So there's this idea that you're doing what you're meant to be doing. You've got a project to deliver. Particularly in my area, we have deadlines. We have project delivered. So if you can show that you're adding value in that and getting your job done, then it's a lot easier for you to go to your management and say, can I have a little bit of time to do this other thing and see if I can add some value elsewhere? Whereas if you are, if your team is struggling to meet deadlines, if you've got a lot of bugs, if you've got a lot of issues, then that becomes a much harder conversation to have because the priorities are kind of shifted. So yes, earning your keep in your day job allows you and can give you the space and can give your management the space to allow you to do something else and then hopefully add value somewhere else. But yes, definitely media deliverables first. If you've got contractual deliverables, they still have to come first.
Did
Yeah, I think when you join an organization, especially if you join an organization as a junior developer, you're not going to have that independence. You're going to be part of a team. You're going to have goals, and that's going to kind of get you to learn. I think building a road, building a career off road or a road off career. What we've been talking about is when you get to the stage of hey, this is no longer quite as fulfilling. I've got these other interests. I'm kind of like to be inspired. I'd like the freedom to kind of go other places, if you like. Fundamentally, if the places you want to go don't align with the organization enough to provide them value, then through some mechanisms, you're probably going to have to part ways because it's not going to work somehow. Yeah, I think it is about. So I wouldn't phrase it as earning your keep, but at least finding out if and where you can follow the path you want to path and be sufficiently aligned that you're providing great value for the organization you're working for. And I think that is kind of like possible in many cases. Possibly not always.
Like for these last 5 minutes or so, I'm listening, and my brain is working on using the manager's hat, and so it's there needs to be somebody who recognizes the value, understands like what is the value, what are we trying to produce, and then things like this, like total cost of ownership and the risks, of just like this like silly component in that picture from XCD. So, so it's great to like people who work for. There needs to be this like alignment, and it's really good if the people you work for, if they see, if you have like common language, that you can communicate like what you do and what is the value, and there is mutual understanding between that. That helps a lot.
You've described it as the dance almost.
So that's like that like it's my phrase I really like. It's like dancing with the system. It's about you cannot change people and change systems too quickly. So what I really like is relying on the natural moves of something. It can be like somebody trying to grow as an engineer, and then adding like a little bit of pressure or a little bit of feedback at the right time, in the right moment, but never, in general, never try to fight the natural movement like too hard, because that's painful for both sides, and usually it doesn't. Usually it's not the optimal strategy.
So would anybody like to say something in closing real fast?
I think I've managed to say almost everything I want to say. Possibly a bit more.
I hope what we've done is inspired you to understand just both sides of this partnership. How you can find freedom within a system, almost any system, and the people who you work for can find value in giving you that freedom, that instead of a struggle against one another, it really is a partnership. And I know that at Bloomberg, we're a little spoiled. There's a lack of hierarchy. We are very much invited to have an opinion. But I've worked at places, starting when I was a kid in a supermarket at 16, where I've managed to do this, where it's really just a matter of including people, including the people around you, including your managers, including in some of the excitement behind what's causing it, and letting people know that you really care. I think it inspires people. Daniel, do you want to do a?
No, it's all good.
All right. Well, I think then maybe we're done. So thank you for coming. Thank you for not making us talk to an empty room for Zoom. And that's it.